Okay, as you've seen by now, Coleridge's poem tells a wild and weird tale about the figure of the ancient mariner. The mariner is cursed, as he explains late in the poem. Forthwith this frame of mine was wrenched with a woeful agony, which forced me to begin my tale, and then it left me free. Since then, at an uncertain hour, that agony returns, until my ghastly tale is told, this heart within me burns. I pass like night from land to land. I have strange power of speech. That moment that his face I see, I know the man that must hear me. To him my tale I teach. This time, he stops a wedding guest just before he goes into the wedding celebration and tells him this long, strange story. There's a lot going on in this story, but one pattern that's important to see is the way it represents the Christian narrative of fall, repentance, and redemption. At the end of part 1, the mariner narrates his sin, his fall. God save the ancient mariner from the fiends that plague thee thus. Why look'st thou so? With my crossbow I shot the Albatross. Okay, that's his sin. That's his fall. You can say, I like to ask classes, why does he shoot the Albatross? And the answer is, we have no idea. It seems totally unmotivated. He just does it. One possibility from a Christian theological standpoint is it's just the result of original sin. We sin because we're born in sin. We're born with original sin. It's also important, though, to notice, since this is a romantic poem, that this is a kind of sin against nature. He kills the bird for no reason at all. Now, the superstitious sailors can't really agree on whether it was a good thing or a bad thing to shoot the albatross. Initially, when things go bad, they say it was bad. But then, when the weather improves, they say it was good. And here's the ambivalent sailors. And I had done a hellish thing, and it would work 'em woe. For all averred, I had killed the bird that made the breeze to blow. Ah, wretch, said they, the bird to slay that made the breeze to blow. Nor dim nor red, like God's own head, the glorious sun uprist. Then all averred I had killed the bird that brought the fog and mist. 'Twas right, said they, such birds to slay, that bring the fog and mist. Soon, though, the ship is becalmed, and the sailors are in danger of death, and they decide that all of this was the fault of the mariner and his sin. All in a hot and copper sky, the bloody sun at noon, right up above the mast did stand, no bigger than the moon. Day after day, day after day, we stuck, nor breath nor motion, as idle as a painted ship upon a painted ocean. Water, water everywhere, and all the boards did shrink. Water, water everywhere, nor any drop to drink. The very deep did rot, O Christ, that ever this should be. Yea, slimy things did crawl with legs upon the slimy sea. Ah, well a day, what evil looks had I from old and young. Instead of the cross, the albatross about my neck was hung. That's the punishment that they impose on the mariner. And it's appropriate. The albatross is a symbol of his sin, and it takes the place of the cross, which is a symbol of atonement and forgiveness. In case you're unfamiliar with the albatross, it's a considerable burden to have hanging around your neck. There's a picture that gives you a sense of the size of an albatross, an excellent symbol for guilt and unforgiven sin. Now, there follows a very strange episode in part 3, a wager between the terrifying figures of death and life and death for the mariner's soul, which I think doesn't really fit in the Christian allegory, but it leaves the mariner, the sole survivor, aboard the ship, with all the corpses of his shipmates around him. Alone, alone, all alone, alone on a wide, wide sea. And never a saint took pity on my soul in agony. The many men so beautiful, and they all dead did lie, and 1,000 slimy things lived on, and so did I. I looked upon the rotting sea and drew my eyes away. I looked upon the rotting deck, and there the dead men lay. I looked to heaven and tried to pray, but or ever a prayer had gushed, a wicked whisper came and made my heart as dry as dust. Okay, the mariner is clearly experiencing survivor guilt, a kind of self-hatred, where he identifies himself with those slimy things that still survive, rather than with the beautiful men who are dead. And he cannot pray, which is a sign that his soul is in a state of sin. Eventually, though, under the light of the moon, he finds redemption, and this is an important moment in the poem, a kind of turning point. Beyond the shadow of the ship I watched the water snakes. They moved in tracks of shining white, and when they reared, the elfish light fell off in hoary flakes. Within the shadow of the ship I watched their rich attire. Blue, glossy green, and velvet black they coiled and swam, and every track was a flash of golden fire. Oh, happy living things, no tongue their beauty might declare. A spring of love gushed from my heart, and I blessed them unaware. Sure my kind saint took pity on me, and I blessed them unaware. The selfsame moment I could pray, and from my neck so free, the albatross fell off and sank like lead into the sea. He blesses the water snakes. But what does this mean? Well, perhaps it's a reconciliation with nature after his sin against nature when he killed the albatross. Perhaps it's also a reconciliation with himself as well, since he identified with those water snakes earlier. The living things are now happy living things and beautiful. Self-forgiveness, maybe. But it's clearly the turning point. He finds he can pray, and the albatross, which represented his burden of sin and guilt, falls from his neck. Again, many strange things happen on his journey home, including, here's a picture, the souls of his shipmates rising to sail the ship. But he does make it home, and he confesses his sin to a hermit. Though his guilt seems to have sunk into the sea, he still finds himself cursed and forced to tell his tale. He also assigns to his tale a moral. Here it is. Farewell, farewell, but this I tell to thee, thou wedding guest. He prayeth well who loveth well, both man and bird and beast. He prayeth best who loveth best all things both great and small. For the dear God who loveth us, he made and loveth all. Okay, I see the romantic love of nature here, but that's what the story means. I mean, what story did he read? Because it's not the story I read. If I were telling a story with this moral, it would be a very different story, and a lot shorter. The moral that he enunciates seems inadequate to the complexity of the poem, and I think that's deliberate. I think Coleridge is forcing us back into the tale to rethink it, to think about its full meaning, not this sort of reductive moral. I'm not saying that the moral doesn't represent part of what the poem means. I'm saying that the moral cannot represent the whole of what the poem means. Okay, we've got here more than a simple allegory. The allegory of fall, repentance, redemption is clearly structuring part of the poem, and it's crucial to understanding the poem as a whole. but there's clearly much more to it. There are elements of the poem that exceed the simple allegory. So in your post, I want you to look at least one element of the poem that for you doesn't seem to fit comfortably with this Christian allegory, and explain to me why it doesn't fit.